Ragusa, and I am joined today by my co-hosts Carlos Ponce in Cuernavaca, Mexico,
Yeah.
and Kim Lantis
Yes.
in Hermosillo, Mexico. And we have our guest with us today, Michael Gasiorek, who is the founder of Truth Cartel. And Michael, where are you chiming in from today? I didn't ask earlier before we got on.
Yeah, you bet. I'm 3 days into my new home in Portugal, usually in San Francisco.
Oh, wow. Cool. Very nice. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. I know it's quite late there. Let's try to keep it interesting and keep you awake, right? So let's
Won't
get
be a
to
problem.
know you a little bit. Please introduce yourself. What's Michael all about?
Sure, yeah. Hell of a question to ask anyone, really. But I'm an Eastern European immigrant. Came to the U.S. kind of bright-eyed, around 7 from Poland. And, didn't come from money. We just kind of started working on what we want our lives to be from there. And I fell immediately in love with psychology, a lot inspired by my mom, and philosophy, partly inspired by some of the books I was reading. And eventually fell into doing that in tech, which was definitely inspired by my dad. A little bit of diplomacy in my early career, a little bit of advertising in my early career. And I realized, on diplomacy, I've used this joke before, it felt like we were doing the right thing really slowly. And then in advertising, the wrong thing too quickly. And so eventually jumped in tech, did, venture-backed startups. I worked in the media side. And, now I found myself somewhere in between doing things, as a marketer in the sort of crypto and high tech world. And that's sort of what Truth Cartel does. But, when I'm not doing that, I love to dance and mix electronic music. I love to travel, as you can tell by these new surroundings. You got a little bit of Portugal right there. And have conversations with friends like these,
Excellent. Well, great to have met you. Thanks for the introduction. A fellow BPM lover. I love that station on Sirius. So revealing
BBC Radio 1 guy too,
Yeah, that's good too. So thanks. Tell us a little bit about Truth Cartel. Okay, you got to tell us a little bit about how the name came about too. It's kind of a cool name.
Yeah,
Truth Cartel. Sure. Tell us what is it that you guys do? How did it come about? And why that name?
How it came about is a weird story too, because I had just quit my job as editor-in-chief at Startup Grind. Oh, we got a little one. Oh, it's amazing. The little founder in training.
This is Zoe. Hi, everyone.
If I can get the finger pointing right. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, you got it right. Like this.
There it is. But also, look, the company was a lot like Kim's daughter there. It fell into my lap, and I just quit my job as editor-in-chief of Startup Grind. I had done something I was very proud of. I was building a media business. That media business did very well, but I didn't have a lot of stake in the game. I joined later in the game. And, I thought I could do it for other people because we had done so much, cool stuff in media. And so I went out and consulted. And I got one gig after another, after a third, after a fourth, mostly in high tech, largely crypto, some biotech. But a lot of these companies, they had a great product, great technology, didn't know how to tell their story. And so before I knew it, I overcommitted. I had too many projects on my plate, and I'm running around my internet profile, begging for help. Who knows how to do paid advertising? Who knows how to do PR? Who knows how to do social media? And I put together a really amazing collective of people, and that's what it's been ever since. This kind of all-star team that gets together, forms a little bit of like a tiger team whenever a project comes into play, and that's also what inspired the name. The Truth Cartel, right? It's because it's really not just like a little, it's not just a team, not in an office, we're all remote. We all work for ourselves and we get together when we need to. So I was looking for a word that kind of says, hey, we're like a group that gets together, a syndicate, a team, a collective, like a cartel. Okay, we got that. Now, what do we do? What are we selling? What are we distributing? Right? What is our product? Okay, well, we want to be in the game of behavioral change. We want to use marketing to change philosophy, right? That was always my big thesis. That's what it's for if it's done well, right? Make people, do better things. And when we kind of started to crack on it, we're trying to change culture, we're trying to change beliefs. What are we selling? We're selling ideas. We're selling the truth, okay? And we jammed the two words together. Lucky enough that we found the .com. And since then, the thesis has always been that we're a belief distribution agency, right? Truth Cartel. And what that largely means is we work with companies whose ideas, it's time for those ideas to take shape and take root. A lot of those are high-tech companies that have a hard time explaining things. Crypto is a big example. Big client base there for us. They're trying to change the financial sector, right? Create more economic opportunity. Work in biotech, where we're trying to, make healthier meats, trying to, save the world in terms of plastic usage. We do a lot with corporate as well now, and we've done plenty more with AI. So we'd love to help these sort of big emerging technologies that are just around the corner tell their stories well enough that they take root in people's minds and effectively distribute new beliefs. And we, tell you all about how we do that. But that's sort of the name of our game, distributing beliefs.
All right, I like it. It's a new spin on influential marketing. I love it. So let's go right into the topic today and dig in a little bit. Who wants to introduce the topic? Kim, you want to introduce the topic today?
Sure thing. So the chosen topic today is accelerating your authority, your truth, right? So Michael will be sharing with us 4 steps to winning over your industry. Because why? Reputation matters. So here we're going to learn how to build a personal platform, to grow your influence and income. So thank you very much. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll pass it over to you, Michael. What are these 4 magical steps? What's step number 1?
Yeah, sure. So look, I think the first thing I got to do is I got to pay my respects, right? I'm not the sort of Wizard of Oz here. A lot of this is me standing on the shoulders of giants. Right, I'm a big fan of Cialdini and his book Influence. There's a whole slew of books I can mention that were big inspirations. Marketing professors, good articles. But the distillation is largely, you read a book like Influence and you think, hey, how do I reverse engineer that in my industry? Right? What's the magic for that? Right? And if you think about the 4 pillars, and we like to jokingly call them the 4 horsemen of authority, because ultimately, once you have all 4 in play, it's inevitable. Is the first one you got to start with is original ideas. That basically means, you have to have some original concepts that you're going to share with the world. And the thing about those ideas is they can't necessarily be, just in your head. They have to be out there in the world somehow in a way that they can self-propagate. So if you're going to write, if you're going to do a blog post, a book, a podcast, videos, whatever, that idea that is original and your idea has to spread on its own. The next big one is you got to develop your audience. You pick a channel that complements your format, and then you grow an audience there. Because if you write one popular blog post and the whole internet reads it, it's not quite as good as having 1,000 fans who are going to follow your every word. Ultimately, that's going to get you that audience. It's going to be rabidly engaged, and they're going to bring their friends. They're going to share your content. It's going to be, exponential. So the third thing then, once you have that audience and that content, is to bring it to other leaders in your field. Right? Just like we're here on this podcast, and this conversation, sharing some of those ideas, you basically, when you have a good idea and you've already shared it with the world, you bring it to people who matter, who are going to amplify it. You help other people use other people's audiences. And that is what we'll call affiliation. Bring your good connections towards your ideas and share them with their audiences. And then you are then peers in your community of all these awesome things you're sharing and teaching. And the last bit is you got to get some credibility, because the way that you break from, hey, I'm influential in my little niche, to I'm an opinion leader, is some respected institution are going to say, hey, watch this guy, watch her, right? These are often press, awards, appear on panels. You become, some sort of mentor to a startup accelerator. Maybe you become an adjunct professor at a university. Any of those things are going to help you break out into the mainstream of opinion leaders. And so again, that's going to be original ideas, building your audience, affiliating with leaders in your field, and then gaining credibility. Those are the 4.
Interesting.
Michael, I have a question.
Go ahead, Carlos.
I'm sorry, Tulio.
No,
it's just one quick question. Yeah, we're discussing. My question is simple. You mentioned a relationship between influence and income. Okay, and it's right there displayed on the
100%
on your tagline. So how does this work? I mean, what's the relationship? I mean, for us who know nothing about this and a lot of other things, and can't even cook. So what is the relationship? Yeah, exactly. So what is the relationship between influence and income, please?
Sure. Well, this is an interesting one, right? Look at DojoLIVE, right? you guys have already built up a little bit of influence and authority here. Why do you do it? Not just because you're educating the masses, but because by you guys showing your faces, by educating the masses, by building good connections with your guests and your listeners, people trust the company. They're more likely to buy from it, right? They're more likely to work with you guys. When they work with you, they're more likely to stay. When they've already been doing work with you for a while, you're more eligible to raise your prices because you have now added credibility, right? So here's those three things that I just mentioned. Easier to close deals, right? Easier to retain relationships that are paying relationships. And lastly, more likelihood to raise prices over time. Right?
You just gave away the secret behind DojoLIVE.
Yeah. I spoiled it all. I'll show myself out. I got a window right here. I can kind of make my jump.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're building.
You guys are masters of this. You really are masters of this. You're doing it, right? And so I don't need to teach you guys this stuff. We're here to talk about how you guys are doing it too.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
Also, one of the things that you mentioned is actually your point number 3, and that's bringing your content or bringing who you are, what you do to leaders. And you've specifically mentioned leaders within your same industry. Is that correct?
That's where you start. I think that's where you start.
And
you start where you have the highest credibility.
And I think this is the part that a lot of people have trouble with, and correct me if I'm wrong, because there's the tendency to look at everybody else in my same industry as my direct competition and not people who can work with me to actually collectively go where we all want to go together. So what's this mind shift look like? Or do we have to just choose a specific niche to work in and realize that, what is that? How can we make that jagged little pill, I guess, easier to swallow and be more effective?
Yeah, I mean, this is like, I was promised that you'd be asking questions from the heart, and I think that's actually a good place to start with this answer, because ultimately, like, you could either be playing like a net zero game, or you can be playing the game where the tide lifts all boats. And a lot of the time, people are fighting over this tiny niche of a niche, where they think their customer base is so tiny and they they eat it all up. But ultimately, they're failing on an opportunity to educate the audience such that there's more net buyers. And if I come on your show, you come on my show, and then we do some cool thing together, there's more goodness that we're putting out in the world. There's more prospective buyers who are now excited about this thing that we've done together. And we're growing each other's audiences, right? I'm not going to have all the answers to your listeners, and neither are you for mine. So this is a net zero game we're playing. And there's a lot more that can come from collaboration in most industries, I think, than from competition. And, how many people can buy my marketing services or buy your services in cloud or development or infrastructure, right? There's an infinite amount of them. But if we don't help each other out, they won't know about us. So lose-lose.
Yeah. Interesting.
It actually reminds me of one of our, prior to the show, was we were getting to know each other. You asked about what makes a great Dojo Live show. And one of the guests that always comes to my mind is a man named Yossi Ginsberg, who's actually a great friend of Carlos. And that was his whole idea. He has his whole long personal story of actually getting lost in the jungle in the 80s.
Wow.
Surviving that, I think he was alone for almost 2 weeks or something. Actually came out the Amazon, and one of his learnings from that experience is exactly that, what you're saying. The resources are actually infinite, right? It's just a matter of if we can all find that space, there's enough to sort of go around, and I think that's a really good philosophy to have.
Yeah, and there's even like opportunities to collaborate in, like, hey, I do this, you do that, but we can do that together for our clients.
Yeah.
So, adjacent industries too.
So it's interesting. Carlos and I were just talking about this topic this morning, and I might have been, you might have changed my mind on this, because it's an interesting idea. Sometimes you're worried about giving voice to a competitor on your show, right? Where in essence, there also is a validation that a competitor comes on your show. Totally. In terms of your authority in the space. So it's an interesting, it's all context, right?
It gives away all their secrets too, right?
Right. So we might have to rethink that one, Carlos. Anyway, we got a question. Speaking of developing the audience, right? You mentioned have an original idea. And I was thinking back to when we came up with our whole theme and a mission for the show, and then the first thing we did is hired someone to go ahead and help us develop the audience. Speaking of audience development, we have our audience development manager, Laura, who's asked a question, and the question is, how do you engage audience? What would be your advice? Like, it's different in every single social media, but for example, in YouTube, Any advice on how to engage audience better?
Yeah, sure. So definitely, I think you hit the nail on the head. Number one is definitely to tailor it to the audience that you're actually building, right? If you're on YouTube, it's different than when you're on Twitter. It's different when you're building a podcast, right? So basically, understand what the best practices are there and build from them, right? Next thing I would do is definitely, especially on YouTube, this is actually important for YouTube specifically, but also applies to other channels, is look what the leaders are doing, right? One of the examples I love is some friends of mine, Charisma on Command, amazing guys. I lived with them in Colombia for a little bit. They became superstars on YouTube. What they did is charisma breakdowns. They take a person like Obama or Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, and they'll do their unique spin, the original idea, on a very trendy and popular concept like an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs, right? And the mashing of those two things together, an original perspective on a very, very already popular idea, is a great thing to do on YouTube. That's called trend jacking. Works very similarly on most other channels, but is especially popular on YouTube. So if you're going to be doing something like trying to jack some of the search trends of what might be happening on YouTube, is you might have a Dojo Live on YouTube about a particular topic of the news, and that would be trendy for the first little hit, right? But definitely be inspired by those who are already popular on YouTube. The last thing I would say is there's probably no better way to grow and to engage an audience than by engaging other people's audiences. They haven't heard your ideas, and when you can go on to do a show on another YouTube channel where one of you guys talks about some of the many things you've learned by hosting Dojo Live for so long, some of the best things from our guests, some of the best things from your company internationally and remotely, that's something that's going to be fresh and unique, and that brings a handful of very enthusiastic people to the channel that will then stimulate the people who are already enthusiastic in your channel, and then they have a conversation. So, you always got to be serving the existing audience and always growing it out a little bit on the edges, because new people feed the old, and vice versa. So those are kind of 3 tips.
Interesting. Carlos, we were talking about how to have a little bit more fun on the recap show on Mondays.
Oh, yeah.
And doing some silly things like, looking up, what are you doing there and stuff like that. So maybe we ought to play some of the video clips from the previous shows and do like, what was that thing where they were watching and making fun of the characters? I don't know, something funny for YouTube that might be interesting. Trend jacking, that's a new term.
We're not going to make fun of anybody.
That's a new term.
Why do we make fun of ourselves?
Yeah, we have to make fun of ourselves. We can't make fun of the guests unless we get them to participate in the
hit me. Let's see it.
Could be a good variety show.
I mean, Kim, you thought I was a Breaking Bad actor, and I'm over here. It's an improvement from Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Okay, all right.
Speaking of Harry Potter, Yossi Ginsburg, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. An improvement from Harry Potter, I suppose. Yeah.
He made a movie based on his story, and the person who played his character was actually Daniel Radcliffe. True story. This is, are we coming like full circle? What is it?
Twist.
Like 8 degrees from Kevin Bacon or something? What are we doing now?
I have to say that the third point, I'm going back to the points here because I want to get to the fourth point because I personally have an interest in understanding that better. The third point, you said bring the content to other leaders. Basically saying build ambassadors. It's interesting. On my other podcast this season, I brought in all these experts, life coaches, authors, facilitators, some of the best people in that space. And the audience has grown exponentially ever since that happened. But in a way, it kind of establishes myself as also an authority in that space because through those connections that happened. And it happened just by accident. I didn't really plan it. I learned from it. So I can see that being intentional about it is worth it. My question is more about build credibility, becoming an opinion leader. You said something like go and become an adjunct professor or something else. What are some of the ways to do that? Like without having to pay for it, right? I mean, you can go and sign up to be a Forbes contributor, and there's a fee for that, okay? Yeah. It's not like you just get invited to do it, and you pay to do that. So I'm more interested in being truly credible in terms of places that recognize you for your contribution, not because you're paying to be part of it. Or am I thinking about that wrong? What are your thoughts?
No, you've seen the dark underbelly. Oh man, yeah. So my big claim to fame was getting Startup Grind media side off the ground, right? So in the early days, we were getting like a little bit of traffic. We're feeling pretty good about it, and eventually, as we grew and grew, these deals with the devil began to appear on our desk. Hey, how about I slip you this amount of money and you give me a link, or you feature my client or whatever? And you could only imagine that the levels of Forbes, Inc., whatever. It gets a little crazy. And so, being a marketing agency, we've seen that. We've seen those opportunities across our plate. And before I tell you how to fix it or how to work around it, I would have to ask, ultimately, what makes you an authority in your industry? You think about, what is the industry I'm in? And you think about, who do you admire, right? Now, you might admire a comedian, or you might admire a real estate agent. You might admire, a design expert. Now, what's going to make each one of those people stand out in their industry is going to be different than, whatever is going to make a marketing professional stand out, right? And so as a marketing professional, I might feel excited to be in a Forbes article, right? That would be amazing for me. But if I'm a professor or if I'm a researcher, that might be worth jack squat for me, because my colleagues will recognize me based on where I'm cited, right? So the first thing I would definitely do is, again, adapt to the audience you're trying to serve. And in terms of reverse engineering, what are those pieces of authority? One of those actually of credibility, let's say. The one that is rather universally appreciated, which is going to make it easier for me to answer your question, is around press. And again, this is an opportunity where, how do you earn press credibly? You build the relationships with journalists before you need them. Now, this is an interesting thing, because you often think that journalists are so busy and they have deadlines, and that's true. But if you could offer yourself up as a useful source on stories going forward, hey, you need people for this kind of content because I see you're reporting on biotech or crypto. Well, I happen to have a really great Rolodex of people. Then you just let me know if you need a quote from X, Y, or Z, and I'll cut the time in half, and I'll get you 3 more than you would have gotten otherwise. So you basically become a friend to them. You become a resource to them. Eventually, you become someone who they can rely on. And there's an opportunity that might emerge over time when you're doing this enough to actually be in a story, to contribute to a story. And while that may not be a big feature in the first month of knowing a person, that sounds about normal for building a relationship with anybody. But often those folks, like myself, have been used for quotes. They relied on me myself for quotes and articles. I've been invited to moderate panels. I've been flown out to conferences, and that's not because necessarily I'm so smart or smarter than anybody else in the room, but because I had those preceding relationships. When you think of a journalist, at the end of the day, they're human too. They only have so deep a list of people they're going to go down before they're like, screw it, I need to get this done. And if you can be close to the top of the list by being useful to them, being a true friend to them, then there's an opportunity to gain credibility that way. But again, I got to say, it depends on your industry. And if that is, you want to be a professor, or if you want to be, an award recipient, short of paying for it, then, you might just have to work your ass off. Might be a good place to start.
All right. So Laura's got another great question. And instead of her being in the background, let's invite her to ask the question directly, because I think it's very appropriate, the question. Go ahead, Laura, please.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, Laura. It's trippy to see us too. We're double trouble.
I'm sorry?
It's trippy to see us in the background there of your screen.
Yeah, I was watching the DojoLIVE. I mean, I wasn't backstage, but I was actually looking at the show.
Yeah.
I will add, Laura's a champ. She's recovering from COVID right now, and she's on the show.
Holy moly. Respect.
Yeah. Like, So I have a question. I know Julia mentioned that I am the audience development manager at DojoLIVE. So this question came up to my mind as listening to the show. So do you think that the content varies depending on the social media you're posting? I mean, LinkedIn is more like a work environment, professional network. Facebook it's more about publishing, connecting with your audience. I mean, sharing content, interacting with followers, as well as Twitter. But Instagram would be something like more casual. My question is more about how can a digital media company such as DojoLIVE, with a specific focus such as like we do, how can we share a variety of content without losing ourselves, like without losing our identity? You know what I mean? Like sharing one kind of content, and then maybe sharing something more funny, more casual, but without being us, like without stopping
Totally.
the professional digital media company. I don't know if I'm making most myself.
It does. Yeah, I mean, you could grow really fast by posting a bunch of memes, but maybe it wouldn't be the audience you want. So let me turn this question back around a little bit. Laura, what is the identity that you're trying to build? Who are you guys? What do you stand for?
Okay, so well, right now I think that's something we are working on defining our identity. If we want to be like recognized as like a whole team, or as we have Tulio, which is the sweetheart of DojoLIVE. I mean, he's the sparkle of the show. We have Kim, that also has really great questions. Carlos, who is the creator and of DojoLIVE, and there's me and the audience development manager, and then we have Ruben, who's also backstage. But I mean, we don't want to lose these things that we bring people together in
Right.
this in these interviews, and share their experience, their cultural experience, and like trying not to have this cultural bridge. We don't want to lose that. I mean, I don't want to lose that. And without,
So I think the answer to the question is, who are we at DojoLIVE? Right? We're a collective of people who care about what we do. We first and foremost care about Ancora and the Ancora message, which is very culture focused. That is the thing that sets us apart from other companies like our own. And what's interesting is tapping into that number 3 of bringing content to leaders. We're very evangelistic, for lack of a better word, I think, of that culture. And that's really been the inspiration behind DojoLIVE. And most recently, we have our tagline, right? Tech beyond borders, stories that bring us together. And that's who we are. That's our identity, where we can get a collective of professionals from a variety of the tech field who can tell their stories, where we can identify these common grounds and use this collective as a way to collectively help one another be better and even be stronger. And particularly across culture, both, I think, as humanity is concerned, and then also work culture as well.
Yeah, Michael, at the end of the day, what we were trying to show is that we're all the same. We all have aspirations. We all have challenges getting to those aspirations. We have paths that are unique to our own, but we share these common threads, right? We share the hustle, the challenge, the overcoming. And our focus is in the tech space because that's where we are. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to show is that we're not very different, even if we are culturally diverse and internationally based, that we're all, at the end of the day, people striving towards trying to find fulfillment in our lives. And that fulfillment can come through entrepreneurial efforts, building a product, helping solve problems in the marketplace, et cetera. So that our message is, let's not think we're so different and so polarizingly opposite of each other, because we actually have a lot more in common than we think. We just use this as a canvas, as a platform for us to get that message across in a way that relates to our industry. But that's our goal, is to bridge the gap between people who just don't understand each other because they're not getting the exposure through these multicultural environments that shows that, we can do things differently, and some things are not appropriate in other cultures that might be appropriate here, and we should learn about them and respect them instead of demonizing them as being wrong, right? So that's anyway, we're coming up on time.
Let me take a quick swing at this question,
please.
and then I'll try to keep it succinct. This is a freaking hard question, and I didn't mean to put anyone on the spot, because ultimately I struggled with this for many months. As Startup Grind, and whatever we accomplished in media and content there, frankly, we wouldn't have done it if we didn't have a good answer to this question. And it took me 9 months of focusing on this before I had a good answer. Once I had the answer, everything else became easy. And that is, and really what you want is an answer to this question that is very succinct, and it's a yes or no. and you use the answer to this question to ask it about every piece of content you post. We came up with the following 2 rules for our pieces of content. Will reading this blog make me a better entrepreneur? It's very no nonsense. It's a very no BS question. Now that worked for Startup Grind. That's what we were about. And the second thing is, and you guys have the same cultural tone, which is nice. Does it also sound like 2 founders sharing war stories over 2 beers? Right? Those 2 things together. This is the golden rule, and this is the silver rule. If it hits gold and silver, it's good to go. And so to answer how you might go about this, you guys have great ideas on this. Now the hard part is getting those great ideas together on a piece of paper, succinct, so that whenever Laura or any one of you is about to put a great piece of content on Instagram or anywhere else, you can look at that and say, hey, does this check out against our golden rule? How about tone? Ship it. And when you have that, everything else becomes very easy. And then you have your rule. And it doesn't mean you can't break it sometimes, but 80-20 on that.
Well, Michael, I have to say, before we started, you asked us all a great question, which was, what were some of the most memorable shows? And I think the answer we gave was those that felt natural and came from the heart, not from the head. I have to say, this show definitely goes on the top list of my favorite shows, because we've learned something from you, which is great. And we're gonna put that into practice for sure. We're up on time,
and in a way, we were interviewed ourselves.
Exactly. It's like we were the guests of the show. It's awesome.
Natural.
You flipped it on us. I love it.
I see what you did there, Michael. I see what you did there.
I've been on your side of the table.
Okay. All right. Okay, so it's a what's today? Thursday. It's a wrap for this week. We had 3 shows. Join us on Monday for the recap show at 1 p.m. Pacific. We're going to recap all 3 shows in 10 minutes. And what do we got next week, Carlos?
Yeah, Tulio, thank you. Next week, we have Tuesday, we have Joe Thurman, the CEO of Interview AI. No, wait a minute. Interview IA, and actually, that's actually the real name. It's IA for some reason. And the topic is IA versus AI, which will solve our HR tech challenges. That's on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we'll be speaking with Stephen Epstein, the CEO of Tax Credit Experts. And the topic is using tax credits to fuel growth, the most overlooked source of funding. That should be interesting too. And finally, on Thursday, the conversation will be with Lucas Emili, the CEO of In Silico Trails, which is a health tech company. And the topic is Accelerate Drugs and Medical Devices Development, the Digital Revolution, with Luca Emili. That's what we have for next week, Tulio, right here on DojoLIVE at 1 p.m. Pacific.
All right, everyone. See you back on Monday at 1 p.m. Have a great weekend. Stay safe.
Stay safe. See you
Thank
soon.
you.
Guys.